girls and women in sport and physical activity means firstly, recognising biological sex, secondly, addressing socio-cultural issues, and thirdly, listening to girls and women's voices. From the beginning of puberty onwards, males have a significant advantage in sex-affected sports and physical activities. Most sports and many physical activities are sex-affected. Inclusion of a range of different population groups, from participation to elite levels, is achieved in sport and physical activity via a range of categories: age, sex, and ability disability. And this ensures that the socio-cultural, health and economic benefits of sport and physical activity are distributed as widely as possible. Otherwise, fit young males would disproportionately participate, compete and win. The male advantage is 10 to 13% in rowing, swimming and running, 16 to 22% in cycling, football and tennis, 29 to 34% in cricket, volleyball and weightlifting, and over 50% in baseball and hockey. And that's Emma's graphic up there. Hi, Emma. A comparison between schoolboys and elite females illustrates how big this sex performance gap is. The schoolboy records for the 100, 800 and 1,500 metres are all faster than the elite adult female records. So moving on to socio-cultural issues. The sex participation gap in a range of sports is significant, so that 77% of all team sports participants and 90% of football participants are male. The sex participation gap starts at around 8 and widens as girls move into secondary school. 64% of school-age girls stop playing sport by their mid-teens because of period pain and shame, and 1 in 4 girls drops out in adolescence, with fear of period leakage a key reason. Decades of research documents barriers to sport and physical activity for girls and women, and the best work actually asks girls and women for their views, preferences and experiences. Boys and mixed-sex sports are barriers for girls who become increasingly self-conscious participating in sport with or alongside boys as they get older. Time after time, research recommends providing girls-only sessions. This is clearly important both because of the biological reality of male performance advantage and the associated socio-cultural reasons, including puberty onset, body image, menstruation and related self-confidence issues. It's clear that inclusion of and equal opportunities for females in sex-affected sports from the beginning of puberty onwards necessitates dedicated female categories, changing rooms and toilets. When women are asked, they choose single-sex rather than mixed-sex toilets and changing rooms, primarily for privacy and dignity reasons. You probably can't see that, but when the pack comes out, you'll be able to have a look. Further, women do not agree with transgender inclusion in opposite-sex sports, toilets or changing rooms via gender identity, and women's voices must be heard. Local authorities, as Kath was saying earlier, are subject to the Equality Act and the Public Sector Equality Duty.
Am I on the wrong one?
Yeah, I'm quick. And must eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations with respect to the 9 protected characteristics, including the separately protected characteristics of sex and gender reassignment. Note that neither gender nor gender identity are protected characteristics, and ensuring compliance with the law means sex and gender reassignment should not be conflated as gender. Biological sex is so important in sport and physical activity that the Equality Act contains a dedicated Section 195 on sex and sport. This permits exclusion of males with a protected characteristic of gender reassignment from female sport and physical activities in sex-affected sports, even with a GRC and a change of legal sex. This upholds fairness, safety and equal opportunities for females. It ensures females with a protected characteristic of sex are included in sport and physical activity on an equal basis with males. Local authority investment and/or provision, which includes biological biological males in female sport via gender identity, may therefore be indirectly discriminating against females and contravening the Equality Act. Importantly, the public sector equality duty cannot be delegated to, for example, governing bodies of sport. The The Sports Council Equality Group guidance for transgender inclusion sets out 10 guiding principles, including the following. Categorisation within the sex binary is and remains the most useful and functional division. Competitive fairness cannot be reconciled with self-identification into the female category. In gender, they mean sex, affected sport. Categorisation by sex is lawful, and the requirement to request information relating to birth sex is appropriate. Achieving inclusion across all strands of the Equality Act is complex and nuanced. This means local authority EDI policies should not privilege one protected characteristic, e.g. gender reassignment, over all the others, for example sex or religion or belief. Unfortunately, Manchester's sport and physical activity strategy is not clear what it means by inclusion and does not appear to refer to the Equality Act's protected characteristics. Some argue that although inclusion in female sport via gender identity is unfair and unsafe in elite sport, it's fine at participation levels. However, my research details the impact on female sport of eligibility for opposite sex categories via gender identity. I use the Stonewall transgender prevalence and Sport England participation data because both competitive sports and those identifying as transgender are disproportionately male. This impacts asymmetrically on female sport because a small proportion of a large group transitioning into a much smaller group makes a disproportionately large impact. So 10% of female football participants could be male, whereas only 0.1% of male footballers would be female under a self-ID process of eligibility for sex categories at participation level. Further, we know trans men and female non-binary players tend to remain in female sports, where they're not disadvantaged by male performance advantage. Female voice. If girls are asked, they choose very different sports and physical activities to boys. Sport Wales data shows latent demand and club sport preferences for girls and boys. Girls want more swimming, netball, trampoline, dance and running, whereas boys want more football, rugby, tennis and basketball. The PE curriculum has often been called a boys' curriculum, and extracurricular sport most closely caters for boys rather than girls. When asked, girls want more choice, less focus on competition and winning, and more focus on enjoyment. And that's obviously not to say that girls should not be able to compete, should they wish to do so. Disappointingly for adults, the preferences of males are disproportionately funded by the sports councils. Women want to swim and men want to play football, in terms of their top 5 preferences. Although as they get older, competitive team games becomes less popular with men as well as women. Female elite athletes' voices are also rarely heard. My research details the views of 19 female Olympians regarding the inclusion of trans women with retained male advantage in female sports. My findings concur with the large surveys subsequently undertaken by governing bodies of sport. The World Rugby Elite Female Survey found only a minority supported the 2015 AOC guidelines. FINA, that's the swimming governing body, international, found 84% thought eligibility for women's events should be based on birth sex. British Triathlon found over 80% of over 3,000 members favoured a dedicated female category. Rugby Football Union received 11,000 responses to their consultation and now operate dedicated female categories. The Cyclist Professional Association survey found over 92% of female professional cyclists did not agree with trans women cyclists competing in female categories. So in conclusion, the separately protected characteristics of sex and gender reassignment should not be conflated in policy. This is a problem in the Manchester Sport and Physical Activity Strategy, which refers throughout to gender, and it means they cannot demonstrate compliance with the Equality Act because they do not monitor the different participation rates of those two different protected characteristics. Single-sex sport in sex-affective sports and physical activity is essential for the equal inclusion of girls and women, because no scientific fix can remove puberty-related male advantage. Trans women carry a legacy, trans girls and trans women carry legacy male advantage into female sport, whereas trans men carry legacy female disadvantage into male sport, and so tend to remain in female categories. Inclusion in opposite sex sport and physical activity, toilets and changing rooms, via gender identity rather than biological sex, indirectly discriminates against female participants. Girls and women choose significantly different sports and physical activities from boys and men, and the disproportionate provision of competitive team games excludes female sport and physical activity participants. Girls and women choose single-sex sport, toilets and changing rooms, and female participants do not consent to the inclusion of trans women in female sport. Thank you.